Welcome back. I'm Seth with East Oak Woodworking. When we left off in the last video, I had just dry assembled this case and left it off here. Today I'm going to be starting on the wine rack that's mounted between these two panels, as well as the shelf that's mounted here. I also am going to be tackling the bottom of this section, as well as some runners and spacers that I need for a drawer that's going to be installed later on. So I've gone and milled up a couple of these pieces that are going to be laminated onto my front and back rails right here. These are going to do two things for me. First of all, I'm going to be building in a drawer right here. It's going to be a hidden drawer, but we'll get to that later. Right now, what we need to know is that, number one, I want the sides of these rails to be flush with the side and the leg. That'll give me an even opening all the way through so that my drawer sides can ride against this piece all the way back. Essentially, these are going to act as drawer runners for me. The other thing that this is going to do is it's going to give me a mounting surface, both on top and on bottom. I'm also going to enclose the bottom, partially because of this drawer right here, but also there's more on the other side that I'm going to get to. So this is going to allow me in the back and in the front to lay the bottom shelf across, but still allow this entire front rail to be exposed. It just gives me a little bit more mounting area. I'm actually going to have another spacer back here that will help the back mount, give it some room to move, as well as space my wine rack piece, and it'll fill this space. It will also give me a mounting point for some hardware that I need to be underneath on the drawer. So we're going to start there. Once I have these dry fit in place, then I can size my bottom shelf. All right, with my bottom shelf cut to size, as well as my rear support here, the next thing I can do is to lay out exactly where my wine rack is going to sit. So this rear support obviously will be cut to support the wine. However, it's going to sit back against this rear panel support in the back, and then the front rack will be 7 inches in front of that. The bottom two will be on the base, and then they'll be spaced up accordingly. Now, one of the challenges that I have is where to reference off of in order to make all of my mortises in these side panels in the right spot. These two side panels are not the same width, and they're also not the same height. So height, I do have a good reference point, and that's the top of the panel. But in order to get my front to back, I've laid out these pieces on the bottom and marked their locations, and I will use those locations as references for marking out the rest of them. Okay, so I've got my 3 panels here. I've got my dimensions printed out, and I also have some marking tools. And I need to lay out 2 sets of layout marks. First is going to be for the wine rack, then on the other side of the center board and on the left-hand panel, I need to cut a dado to support the shelf that's on that side. So I'm going to start with the wine rack. Now, as I do this, I'm going to be referencing the top edge of both of these panels because that's the only common edge. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark the height of the bottoms of all of the supports for the wine rack. Okay, so I'm getting ready to cut the mortises in the panels for the wine rack. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little nervous about doing this with all the work that I put into doing this veneer. So I've got my router set up in a plunge base. I've got the depth set to 1/2 inch below the surface of the plywood. So that way I've still got a 1/4 inch on the other side. I've got a guide set up on this side. I'm also going to do a full depth plunge at each end of the mortise first before I go the full length and remove all of the waste in between. So here goes. So all of my joinery is now done on the panels that I needed, as well as on the ends of all of the wine rack components and the shelf that's going on the left-hand side of the cabinet. My next step is to actually cut these wine rack pieces to shape. So I did another video previously on building a wine rack that was a standalone piece. And I used these exact patterns. In fact, these are the patterns I built in that video, and explained the process of pattern routing. I'm not going to repeat all of that here, but I will leave a link to it. However, the basic steps are that I've traced out this pattern onto all of the pieces. I'm going to take it over to the bandsaw and rough cut it at the bandsaw. And then after it's rough cut at the bandsaw, I will lock them into the templates or into the patterns here, and I'll take them over to the router table and I will pattern route them to their final shape. Okay, so that's going to wrap this one up. As you can see, I've got the wine rack built out and dry fit in. I've got the shelf in and all the joinery done on the side panels that I wanted to get done. What I'm going to be doing in the next video is working on these back panels that need to go in, as well as working on the drawer that's going to go here and the pieces that I need to put in for spacers on the side. Now, one thing to note, I didn't record when I did this dry fit, but if I had, it probably would have been pretty comical. It definitely emphasized to me that with all the joinery that I have in here on this side, it definitely takes some finagling and some patience to get that together right. So I'm definitely going to have to use either something like epoxy or maybe Titebond 3, something that has a really long open time when I go to actually do my glue up. And I'm also convinced now that I'm going to need to do some sub-assemblies on this, which means I'll probably pre-assemble this entire back panel, probably pre-assemble this front panel. Not entirely sure there. I may also pre-assemble this left side when you're looking at it, but I'll see when I get closer to it. So the dry assembly, it's an important step, and I highly encourage you to do them on anything that you're building, because you'll figure out where there are those tough spots and those snags when it comes to assembly. So pretty happy with where it is today. In the next one, like I said, I'm going to start jumping into the back panels in these drawers. So thanks for watching. See you on the next one.